Hey everyone again. I hope you had a good time, good morning, and good lunch. Unfortunately, we had a session that was planned now with the Pascal Gauthier, the CEO of Ledger. Unfortunately, had to cancel last minute for personal reasons. The good news is that we had loads of sessions that were planned for today that we eventually decided not to add to the program, not to have the two packed program. But one of them was this one, this topic that we actually care a lot about, crypto, that we're very interested in, and something that we're working more and more on. So we thought that it was a good opportunity to talk about that. And this topic is reconciling the off-chain and on-chain worlds, and the quest for the source of truth. This morning in multiple panels, including the audit panel, there was we discussed the topic of how can you trust data? How can you trust, blockchain data? And that's basically what this talk is about. So if we start with the problem, the core problem is that connecting blockchains, data infrastructure to, here we put core banking system, but it could be obviously any form of internal database, is not straightforward. We had also the discussion with Edward from Grayscale this morning. It's not straightforward. The idea is that blockchains are a new paradigm for back office teams. And the main point is that blockchains are public networks. And because blockchains are public networks, there is not a single source of truth. In the non-crypto world, when you are in a back office team, you pull data from different venues. If you're doing accounting on banking transaction, you will pull data from your bank API. If you're doing accounting from, payments, you can pull data from a payment network, company infrastructure, and so on. In blockchains, the data is available. With blockchains, the data is available to everyone. And that's a challenge. That basically requires to think about the problem in a different way. The second difficulty is that building your own data infrastructure is actually complex. It requires new skills, how to run a node, how to index a chain, how to then manipulate the data and to understand what is happening, how to also learn, every blockchain is different, so you need to learn about how the different blockchain data structures are from a chain to the other, and that requires some time, and that requires some skills that potentially you might not have in your team. And the third element is that with blockchain data, it is actually very hard to be accurate, but it is, on the other side, very easy to verify. So with one of the procedures that was mentioned this morning, you can very easily ask a node, okay, what is the balance of that wallet? You can compare that with what you have, and you can see very quickly and very easily if you're right or wrong. But being right is actually pretty difficult. So eventually, what that means is that just blockchains are not just a new data feed that you can easily plug to your back office system. There's a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself. So why is that important? So obviously here in this, think about the context, in the context of reconciliation. So you can do reconciliation, bank reconciliation, for instance. If you do reconciliation not with banking product, but you do reconciliation with a crypto product, you will need to have this source of truth on which you can leverage to do this reconciliation. So you need to find the right way and the best way for you to find the source of truth and trust that data. So here, obviously, we're talking about if this data comes from an exchange, if your activity is on an exchange, you're trading on an exchange, or if you're working with a qualified custodian. Solution is actually doing the custody of your asset, not a custody infrastructure provider. These companies, because they will be liable and are responsible to give you the data. So these companies are actually the source of truth. What I'm talking about here is more on the self-custody side. If you work with also custody infrastructure provider, if you're writing your own contracts and your own products, here this is where this topic of finding the source of truth will actually be extremely relevant. So one question, obviously, the first question is can Etherscan be the source of truth? So all of you know that there are loads of, the blockchain is public and the data is available, and there's loads of products that can display that that data. Etherscan obviously is the most famous explorer for Ethereum, and they do that very well. They can expose that data, transaction data, wallet transaction history, and all that stuff. But there are three main problems when you use these type of software, these type of tools. The first one is there's a completeness issue. We talked a lot about completeness, accuracy this morning in the audit panel. And there is definitely like a completeness issue. The more you will interact with these tools, and especially for like smaller chains, you will see that you are missing transactions from your on-chain activity. And this is not because like these tools are not good. Like these tools are actually great. It's you missing transaction because of the permissionless nature of blockchain. So like it's a bit technical, but when you do this thing that is called indexing, which is creating the on-chain data, you need to have an input. So you need to tell the technology where to look at in the block. And this information are basically smart contract functions. So you need to say, hey, look in this block if there is this supply function that's been triggered, and if there is, you deduct and you pull all the transaction data. And given that anyone can build and write and release new functions because of the permissionless nature, you're always kind of lagging behind. And these tools obviously are lagging behind like any other tools. And given that if you're not in control of the data yourself, you will face that completeness issue, which is the bigger you are, if you're audited, that's a big problem. The second one is if you got the transaction data, you may also face a data accuracy and granularity issues. So some smart contract transaction might be parsed properly. Some ins can look like outs, outgoing transactions, and so there is definitely an accuracy issue. And the third element, which is actually something that's been discussed a lot this morning, is that these tools, they don't meet like the regulatory and audit standards that you have to fund your regulatory audit standards. Like the most straightforward thing is that they don't have SOC 1 and SOC 2, and the reason why they don't have that is because they are like open source tools or like mostly retail focused, or at least like they are not like enterprise grade tools. So these type of tools are not like the good option for like this source of truth. So how can you build yourself this like audit ready on-chain data infrastructure? So without going too much into the detail, we'll try to do a little bit, is basically you have three main steps, right? The first step is, and we discussed that this morning, the best way to do it is you run a node, and you run a node yourself. And you apply the right controls when you run the node to make sure that the node is available, to make sure that you're not missing any block. And you can work with audit firms that will help you on like implementing these controls when you run the nodes, but there's some very specific things that you can implement when you run the node. Then you have this node that is running. Obviously, you can't ask a node, hey, give me the transaction history of that wallet. This is not how they're structured. So you need to do this thing called indexing, which is kind of the process that I described. So like going block after block, taking your transactions, reorganizing them in a database, and so that it can be queried. So that it could be queried through wallet addresses and not through blocks. And here again, there's a lot of controls, including a couple that are very specific that you can implement, that you have to implement to have like complete and accurate data. And one of them is again this very simple procedure. It's difficult to do it at scale, but it's a very simple procedure which is doing ongoing balance reconciliation. So you have these indexers that is pulling data into your database. You sum all the wallets history, and then so that gives you live balances, and constantly you query another node and you ask the balances of these wallets, and if they match, it means that your data is complete. Again, very simple to verify. And if they don't match, it means that you have a problem, that you're missing something, and so you can come back to indexers and to the indexer, and given that you're in control of the data, you can do that iterative process, and at some point you will get closer to a source of truth. And then the third element is then when this data, so the indexer basically is kind of a database that you can query, and then the data goes to your back office platform, and here you can do again some automated reconciliation controls in this third part. So if you're doing all that, you can basically get very close to a source of truth. And again, it's very hard to, eventually it's very hard to do, but very easy to verify. So if the data is complete, if this reconciliation processes are successful, it means that you can really rely on the data. And then you can have like this auditable reconciliation process, and you have finally your source of truth that you can use for auditable reconciliation. So then the last piece is like more specifically to our company. So this is something that building this source of truth, and the reason why these things matter to us is because it's something we've been working for a very long time on, not through the reconciliation use case that I mentioned, really through the accounting angle and the audit readiness angle. When we started the company, we were using Etherscan and tools like that to pull the data. We had our clients had their first audits. We realized that that was a mess, and we can't do anything with it. And so I guess 3 years and a half, 4 years ago, we decided to really dig into that topic and build everything ourselves. And so the initial point was really accounting and tax reporting. But now that our clients can benefit this sort of source of truth within the software, we can start doing more things and interesting things like reconciling on-chain and off-chain data, on-chain data with internal databases bank back office and stuff like that. So yeah, this is actually difficult to read, but you can basically add on the top left, you have this thing called reconciliation module that can sit within your all crypto back office operations, and you have something that is fairly complete. So yes, it's still especially on the reconciling on-chain, off-chain transaction, it's still very, very early. There's not a lot of people that working on these topics, but yeah, this Banco Colombia is one of our large bank clients we're doing that with. But it's still super early. So if you have done that internally, if you have has these questions of, okay, how can we think about building reliable data infrastructure, and you found good solutions that I didn't discuss, I'd be super excited to talk about that. Thank you very much.